Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Andrew Shikyar. I lead marketing here at FIDO Alliance. It's great to have so many people on the webinar today. This is actually our first webinar in 2018. As you likely know, FIDO is a member-driven organization where companies spanning borders and industries are all collaborating to create open standards for modern authentication. While many of our webinars focus on specific work areas or feature case studies from companies deploying FIDO authentication, the focus today is on FIDO's membership itself, specifically why and how your organization can get involved in our efforts. Leading our webinar today, will be FIDO Executive Director Brett McDowell, and he'll be joined by Alan Martin, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Gemalto. Alan's a FIDO board director and also serves as co-chair of the FIDO Europe Working Group. He'll give you some hands-on expert perspectives from an actual FIDO participant during today's webinar. So before we get started, I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this will be recorded and the slides and replay will be posted afterwards. Secondly, questions are certainly encouraged. There's a question feature in the GoToWebinar client. Please type your questions there. We'll try to answer them midstream if appropriate. Otherwise, we'll handle them all in Q&A at the end of the session. Last but not least, there's a survey at the end of the webinar. I'd ask that you please fill out that survey. Your feedback is really helpful in informing how we structure our webinar program moving forward, and we'll also ask you some added questions about your company and how you may wish to engage with FIDO Alliance moving forward. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce to you FIDO Executive Director Brett McDowell.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. And whether you're here with us live at this webinar or hearing the recording after the fact, I presume that if you are here, that means that you already have some familiarity with FIDO, the FIDO Alliance, FIDO authentication technology, and you're really interested to understand whether membership in the Alliance is appropriate for you, the considerations and how to go about pursuing that further. So that's going to be the focus of our time together today. But I'm going to start by kind of giving some baseline status and updates around the FIDO Alliance and the FIDO ecosystem, so you understand what we're actually creating here in the market, how we're going about it, and why we're here. So I'll start with the problem statement that brought the FIDO Alliance together in the first place. Data breaches are untenable. That needs to stop. Every year we have more data breaches than the year before. Every year is a record-breaking year, and not for the metrics that you're hoping for. So here are just some of the many headlines in the past several months. Over 3 billion credentials stolen in just one example, and many others. And it's not just hitting any one vertical, and it's not just hitting any one region. Data breaches that can be and have been analyzed and tracked to their root cause, being lost and stolen passwords, are on the rise, and they're getting worse each and every year. So what we have to do as an industry is respond and come up with not a band-aid, but a fundamental shift in how we are authenticating and protecting performing identity and access management, both in the enterprise and in the consumer space. These are the organizations that are currently leading the way. These are the members of the FIDO Alliance Board of Directors. They set our strategy. We'll get into a little bit more about exactly the role of a board member and if that's a membership level that you might be interested in yourselves. But we also have sponsor members who make up the heart of our working groups that produce the standards and best practices, associate members who benefit by early access to the technology and through other networking opportunities that we'll get into, and partnerships. Some of you listening to this today may be with a trade association. So I would encourage you to reach out to us to pursue a partnership. That we have a framework for partnering with other trade associations outside of our formal membership. So our alliance has a very narrow scope of work. We are the Fast Identity Online Alliance, but we are not trying to solve all the problems facing digital identity today. We're focused on the unsolved problem of authentication. In the other standards and other frameworks like Identity Federation, there's kind of this black box. Authentication happens here. And what the FIDO Alliance is doing is filling that box with an open industry standard. We need to replace passwords and all shared secret credentials, anything that's vulnerable to scalable attack. That's what we're after. That's what's going to stop the data breaches at the scale they've been at, is removing the remote attack from the equation, removing that vulnerability. Not only is it a well-known vulnerability and a well-exploited vulnerability, but it's on the rise. It's getting cheaper to reach more scale as an attacker against passwords and even one-time passcode, shared secret credentials. And as we replace passwords with a modern authentication solution that is strong, we recognize that FIDO is not a silver bullet either. FIDO is that first and strongest cryptographic signal that you have the right person on the other end authenticating to your application. But we understand that that fits into the rich, risk-based, and increasingly intelligent back-end systems that everyone has. We also recognize that even if you have a very smart risk-based authentication back-end, you need a reliable signal. You don't want to leave the front door wide open, relying entirely on passwords, because then you're going to only catch a portion of the stolen credential account takeovers that come into your system. So our priorities for designing the FIDO authentication solution are security. We have to improve security, and we can do that by moving away from shared secrets toward asymmetric cryptography. FIDO Alliance certainly did not invent public key cryptography, but we're leveraging it and building protocols to allow it to interoperate across any device with any website and any cloud service. Usability. We need to improve the user experience. Well, we tried adding extra security to authentication. That's how we went from only having passwords to offering so many people two-factor authentication with a one-time passcode. But that one-time passcode was still a shared secret at the end of the day and is now vulnerable to exploitation, and that exploitation is on the rise. But not only is the security compromised of that second step, because so many industry leaders offer two-factor authentication as an option instead of mandating it, we're very well aware of consumer response. And basically, opt-in rates are very low to that extra two-step verification. So if that's all that you have, of course, we encourage people to turn it on. It's better than a password alone. But as the industry addresses the root cause of the data breaches, it must also address the root cause of people choosing to not opt in for greater security. We want to encourage users to accept this new innovation by making it easier for them instead of harder for them. We're going to ask less of our users with FIDO authentication as opposed to asking them to do something extra. Privacy is a priority for the FIDO authentication solution. We recognize that biometrics play a great role in improving the user experience. Nothing's easier than just looking at a device or touching it, maybe speaking to it. But it's very important to understand where that biometric template is being stored, how it's being protected, and where it might be shared online. So the FIDO requirement, the privacy requirement for FIDO authenticators, is that any biometric data that might be used as part of your FIDO authenticator solution must be stored on device. And we're seeing that reinforced with things like Europe's new GDPR regulation. Interoperability. Ultimately, that's why we're a standard setting body, is to facilitate interoperability. We could never attempt to replace passwords if we didn't have a strategy with as much scale as passwords. The only way you're going to get that scale is with an open internet standard, where any device can implement to it any application can implement to it. There doesn't need to be any coordination between parties. Doesn't have to be any licensing agreements signed. It's just an open, freely available technology that anyone can implement. The same principles that built the web and the internet, we're leveraging for the FIDO ecosystem. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the FIDO solution. Now, this is what the Alliance members have put together so far, and it continues to evolve and be refined. So on the left-hand side here, we're looking at the end user with their personal device. This is their smartphone, their tablet, their PC, their security key. This is a personal device that they have that's in their possession. And possession is a critical factor in the FIDO security model. User verification is something that the FIDO standards provide an abstraction layer for. This is where proprietary innovation will continue to thrive. There is a lot of innovation on different biometric techniques, behavioral techniques, all to decide, to answer the question, is this the same user that I registered a credential with? That's what the application in the cloud needs to know. Is this the same user? So user verification happens between the user and their device. No challenge response or user verification goes over the internet. After the device has authenticated, has verified the user, then over here on the right-hand side, the FIDO authenticator is participating in a challenge response protocol, the FIDO protocols. And this is where they're authenticated over the internet to the application in the cloud. And what's happening here is that when the device was registered with that user for that account, there was a cryptographic key pair produced, a public-private key pair. The private key for that account is stored on the device. That private key is protected by the security properties of the device and is never shared, never leaves the device. The user cannot share their private key. This takes away all of the phishing attacks. There's no way they can be socially engineered to give away their credential. It's not how the protocol works. Instead, the server will send a challenge to the device, and then the device verifies it's the same user. Then once the user verification has been accepted, the private key is used to cryptographically sign the challenge, and that signed challenge is what goes back to the server. The server's never received the private key, does not have a copy of the private key, but it does have the corresponding public key that was stored on the server when the user registered. So they're able to verify the signature on the challenge by using the public key. And that's how someone is strongly authenticated with a true multi-factor authentication event, leading to the highest assurance levels that we have for online authentication, because every FIDO authenticator has a what you have component, a possession component of the multi-factor authentication, and some will have what you know. Maybe you can use a PIN number local to the device, not over the internet, or what you are, maybe a biometric challenge, something like that. And of course, FIDO authenticators can be used as just one of multiple factors, such as the very popular security key deployments that have been led by the likes of Google and Facebook and Dropbox, where you're still using a traditional password for your first factor, but you're using a FIDO certified security key as your second factor. So that's the technology we've developed to address the fundamental problem. We've done it together, working in what we call working groups, going over the business requirements, going over the design principles and that around privacy and identity management best practices. And the result of all that are the specifications listed here at the bottom. FIDO UAF, Universal Authentication Framework. This is the protocol we have in market today that provides for this true multi-factor authentication event from a single user gesture. By just touching something or speaking to something or looking at something, you can have a strong multi-factor authentication event. And then FIDO U2F, that's the protocol for the security key second factor, universal second factor protocol. In addition, we're working on something called the FIDO 2 project, which is designed to bring FIDO authentication to all the web browsers and all the operating systems of the world. That comes in two pieces. One is the CTAP, Client to Authenticator protocol. This is the device-to-device protocol that PC, let's say, talking to an external device or even talking to a phone as your authenticator for something that might happen at a PC or even a kiosk use case. And web authentication specification, which we are developing in partnership with the W3C and will be ratified by the W3C as the way to do strong authentication for the web. Now, something else I wanted to mention that the FIDO members saw the need for, which is bootstrapping trust in this new ecosystem. We needed an answer for the question, how can I trust the assertions from this device? I didn't buy the device. I don't have a contract with the vendor of the device. This is a bring your own device ecosystem. How can I trust the security properties or really anything about this device? Well, first and foremost, if it is following the FIDO protocol, which you can verify in your server, you know that it's not vulnerable to phishing attacks. That's a huge win. So even a software authenticator that doesn't provide any assurances about its implementation, you know is more secure than a password. But then what if you need more? What if you're a regulated company and you need to show your due diligence for, trusting these devices to authorize transactions? Well, that's why we have this public registry of authenticator metadata. This is called the Metadata Service, and this is something that the FIDO Alliance provides free of charge to the ecosystem, and it allows every certified FIDO device to register itself with this public registry and to upload its own claims around the properties of their authenticators, so that now any application can subscribe to this registry. It'll have a local cache. There's no real-time aspect to this protocol. You just subscribe, maybe update your database once a day or something. And you have all that metadata, so you can verify the hardware-backed attestation. If you're looking for hardware-backed security attestation, you can use the attestation certificate you get from the device to then look up and verify the claims by this manufacturer. So, for example, a company like Samsung or any other phone manufacturer could advertise, here's the modality I use to authenticate my user. They could even include claims, here's my security certification level, and things of that nature. So this is a key part of how we're bootstrapping trust in the FIDO ecosystem. And we would have never come up with that if not for gathering the businesses together, the relying parties who brought to us very early in the process the requirements for bootstrapping trust in the ecosystem. Now here's a quick update on the development of the supply side of this market. So what we're charting here are products that have gone through FIDO certification testing, whether they're UAF or U2F compliant products, since we started the program in April of 2015. And we're now up to 425 certified implementations in the market. That includes devices, servers, as well as components that can be used to put together a FIDO authenticator. So the message here is clear. There's demand for FIDO authenticators in the market. That demand is growing, and so is supply to meet that demand. Now, another update on the FIDO market. A lot of people who I talk to who are operating websites, web services, mobile services, they want to know the penetration rates for embedded authenticators when a smartphone has a FIDO authenticator kind of shipping out of the box. Now, something to know is that you can always add support for FIDO. In other words, you can put FIDO capability in your mobile app. You don't need the device to have a FIDO client on the device that was put there by the manufacturer. However, there are some, deep security integration benefits from doing so. And so these are some of the companies, the leading brands, who are shipping their flagship devices with FIDO authenticators. Both phone and tablet, as you might expect, mobile devices would be leading, but also PC. Lenovo and Intel have been collaborating to deliver FIDO-enabled fingerprint sensors for web-based use cases, and that's in market today. Samsung has been delivering FIDO certified implementations on their fingerprint sensors ever since the S5. Sharp, Sony, Fujitsu have been doing a lot of work with leading mobile network operator NTT Docomo in Japan, as well as providing those FIDO capabilities to their flagship devices that are being shipped worldwide. And Huawei and LG, again, other leading market brands in ZUK in China. Now, let's look at the FIDO market from another perspective. I mentioned the FIDO 2 project and the specifications that are currently in development. It's very important to a lot of services to know, when will FIDO be in the platform? Like, when can I just know that all my users, or nearly all my users, have FIDO authentication capability? First off, I would encourage anyone to pilot and deploy the service now, because there are hundreds of millions of FIDO-enabled devices in the market today. However, some of you might need to also look at the trajectory of the FIDO marketplace to make the business case to invest and deploy now. So this is for you. Currently, the web authentication specification is literally weeks away from going to candidate recommendation, which is the key milestone for commercialization of a W3C standard. Firefox, Opera, Edge, and Chrome are all browsers that either already support a FIDO protocol like U2F, or are in the process of building support for WebAuthn, or FIDO 2. So the FIDO 2 protocols are going to be supported by all the major browsers in 2018. Now let's look at what Qualcomm, Intel, and others are doing with devices, and the story with Windows. Microsoft has publicly advertised that they are going to build FIDO 2 capabilities into Windows 10, what they call the Windows Hello authentication platform. You can already see those builds in the wild in the developer releases they have that are coming out in their next release, the spring of 2018. So Microsoft is putting FIDO authentication on all the Windows 10 devices, native operating system capability support. Intel is already there with something they call IOC, which enables authenticators in devices, even before it's part of the Windows 10 infrastructure. And then for Android, Qualcomm has done a lot of work with Android manufacturers so that they put FIDO capabilities right into the Snapdragon modules that run so many Android devices. So that's how you get to those hundreds of millions of smartphones already in the market. However, in addition to that, Google has publicly demonstrated a FIDO-enabled native fingerprint API in Android back in October. It's not yet a shipping version of Android, but obviously they're making progress of bringing native Android support to the FIDO ecosystem. And then Apple. Apple has recently joined the Web Authentication Working Group in W3C. So that's kind of the Safari side of the house. In addition to that, any app developer who wants to take advantage of either Face ID or Touch ID can do that in the Apple native manner, which does not include FIDO protocol support, but you can just integrate to Touch ID and Face ID while adding FIDO protocol support in your app. And many people have. Bank of America comes to mind as a good example. All the Bank of America mobile apps, when they use Touch ID on an iPhone, they're using FIDO. So another view into the FIDO marketplace, the services that are already live. So it's one thing to have supply for the standard, like if you build it, they will come. But this shows you that they have come. And FIDO is being deployed at incredible scale by some of the biggest brands in the world and worldwide. So Google and Facebook, with billions of users, have enabled FIDO security-based authentication. And Bank of China is an example of many banks in the East, Mizuho Bank, also Shinhan Bank. So across Asia, we have a lot of financial services enabling FIDO. eBay has deployed it as a merchant. Aetna with healthcare, their native apps are running FIDO authentication, PayPal, and you can see the major brands here. Even government services in the UK are now being enabled with FIDO authentication. So now that's the background. So let me look at what it means to join the Alliance. So this is our structure. The Alliance is a nonprofit corporation. It's a 501c6 trade association. You're governed by our board of directors and the board committees. And then we organize our work in 2 tracks, technical development and market development. So here are the benefits of membership. And I'm telling you this so that you can consider what's the right level for me, for my organization. Joining as an associate, that's the right level if you're just looking for maybe 1 meeting a year that you would travel to and get 3 or 4 days of networking with the other members of the Alliance. You want a discount on your certification fees, and you want early access to protocols, and you also want to be listed as a member of the Alliance. An associate is right for you. But if you want to be involved in developing these solutions, trading lessons learned and best practices, then you want to be a sponsor. This is also available for government agencies at a discount. And that gives you all the associate benefits as well as full working group participation. You can attend all the plenary meetings. And then if you think that it's important for you to have a hand steering the strategy of this ecosystem, then you want to pursue a board membership. All of the leadership positions are elected from board member companies, and the board has fiduciary responsibility, and the board ultimately approves all specifications and all publications. Here are some of the standing committees of the board. We have an executive council that serves as an advisory and oversight function for everything the Alliance does. Marketing and communications committee to look after our professional marketing and public relations and analyst relations program. Certification oversight committee for the growing certification program, and a public policy oversight committee where we do respond to open requests for information and comment periods with regulation affecting authentication. For sponsors looking to get involved in the technical track, we have a security requirements working group that sets all the security certification requirements for authenticators. The FIDO2 project working group, defining the next generation of FIDO protocols. The UAF technical working group and certification working group who sets the rules and policies for all the certification programs. If you're interested in market development, we have deployment at scale. This is really for those service provider companies that look at what are all the other issues and challenges besides how the technology works. How do I actually take FIDO to market? Those companies are welcome at the deployment at scale working group where they can share their experiences, their challenges, and they set industry best practices together. Also, if you are interested in growing the market opportunity in any of these countries, China, across all of Europe, India, Japan, and Korea, we have a regional working group focused on those market requirements. And then we have a privacy and public policy working group where, again, we look after the privacy principles of the Alliance and make sure all of our new protocols meet those privacy requirements. But also, and increasingly, that group is focused on government relations, engaging with governments around the world. And I know that Alan will be able to say more about how we've done that in Europe shortly. And all the members are welcome to come to the plenary meetings. So this is where we bring together all the working groups and committees into one location. We do this 3 times a year, once in North America, once in Europe, and one in Asia Pacific region. And here is the schedule for this year. We just finished the North American meeting in January in Monterey, California. Our European meeting will be in Amsterdam in May, and our Asia meeting will be in Singapore in October. Now, the one thing that almost every new member runs into, especially the larger companies, is the IPR policy. So I want to touch on this. The IPR policy is a reciprocal promise to not assert your patent claims that are necessarily infringed by a compliant implementation of the normative requirements of a board-approved FIDO specification. And because it is a non-assert covenant, a lot of IP department attorneys see that as a red flag. However, we have put procedures in place to protect your patent portfolio. It's called the IPR review period. So every time we produce a specification, there's a 45-day review period that allows your legal team to see if there's anything in the specification that is, in your mind, an overreach, goes beyond the authentication scope for FIDO Alliance, and might read into something that your company cares about and has patents on. In which case, you have a formal process to pursue, and we can work that out. I'm proud to say that this has both protected all of the patent portfolios across our huge membership, as well as enabled us to produce entirely unencumbered specifications that are ready for internet scale. And some testimonials. So I think I'll cut this short given time, but here Google, ING Bank, and PayPal all speaking to the important reasons for why they joined the FIDO Alliance. You can find all of these on our website from over 30 companies that sit on the board. But now I'd like to get right to Alan Martin of Gemalto so he can speak for himself why they've joined the board and how they've gotten value out of the FIDO Alliance. And then we'll have some Q&A. Alan?
Yes, so this is Alan Martin from Gemalto. Thank you, Brett. So maybe just to explain how we got here, we're actually have been a member of the FIDO Alliance for 4 years now, since 2014. But actually, Gemalto has been in the authentication business for a long time. As you probably all know, we are a large producer of smart cards and other security devices. And so the scope of the FIDO Alliance is exactly in line with what we do as a company. So why did we join? I think the first thing is that we share the same view as the FIDO Alliance. The fact that the standards are based on a device is exactly in line with what we do. Interestingly, we're also happy that the FIDO standards cover a variety of implementations. For example, devices, okay, USB keys or smart cards, or also mobile phones. And here in the mobile phone space, you can find implementations that are based on hardware or based on TEEs or based on hardened software. Well, this is in line with what we do. So we're quite happy that we share the same view. The other important aspect of joining a standardization body is that authentication is actually a very horizontal subject. It covers, as far as we're concerned, all the market segments that we address, be it in banking or in government or in healthcare, or there is always a need for authentication of people. And so what we like, because we do, as a company, we address these markets, and so we develop products for these markets. And what we like with the standardization aspect that FIDO brings is a cost reduction, because FIDO service that we develop for this market will be reusable for that market, or FIDO authenticators that we build, whether it's a device or a card or an implementation of a smartphone, whatever we do for a banking market can be reused to address the telco market, and so on and so forth. So there is this notion of alignment between what we do and what the FIDO Alliance proposes. Beyond that, I think importantly for us in Europe, there is a strong need, a growing need for authentication linked to the regulation, as you know. So I don't know if you're familiar with PSD2 and GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, or eIDAS, which is about electronic identities. So all these markets require some form of user authentication. And what we find is that FIDO as an organization has an attractiveness. We see that now more and more in customer requests, that they want to use a standard rather than a proprietary solution. But also the fact that through FIDO we leverage the marketing push. So FIDO is a pretty well organized association. Okay, it's very well structured between the technical working groups, the working groups that deal with public policies or the deployment aspects and the certification and so on and so forth. And in particular, there is a marketing team in FIDO that helps companies like Gemalto to reach out to the market, and we are happy to leverage the marketing push of FIDO. So be it through FIDO seminars or the participation in events or conferences and so on and so forth. So again, coming back to the European market, there is an enormous challenge for banks and other financial institutions to provide strong customer authentication, and that is linked to the PSD2 regulation. It's an enormous challenge, and so if each and every vendor goes out there with their own solution, it's not helping banks to decide because of the fragmentation. And so we see value in the FIDO standards to bring a solution that works across a number of vendors, and that's reassuring for banks, and that will make their investment in strong customer authentication last longer. So that's what we like, and one of the reasons why we decided to create a FIDO Europe working group, and Gemalto is very active in this working group to help with the promotion indirectly, if you will, of our own solutions through the FIDO marketing push. Maybe to finish on the other interesting aspect that Brett already mentioned, when you join the FIDO Alliance, you join a community of people and companies that share a common interest. And so what is nice, especially when you attend the face-to-face meetings, is you get an opportunity to share views with others. When you join a working group, whether it's a technical working group or a regional working group, a group more involved with the deployment aspects, you get insights. You get insights on the upcoming standardization. You get insights on the progress in entering a new market. So this, let's say the fact that you can share views or get insights ahead of companies that are not part of FIDO is interesting. There is a specific working group beyond the regional working groups that deals with the deployment aspects. So for example, we address problems that every company will face when deciding to use a device to authenticate its users, which is, for example, what happens if I lose the device. Okay, and so the FIDO Alliance works on this kind of problems, and by being a member, you get insights on how to resolve this or the best practices you can share with the other members of the Alliance. And so that's what Gemalto is interested through the membership.
Thank you, Alan. Now, we'd like to open it up and start taking questions from anyone who might have joined us on today's webinar. You can direct those to either Alan and his experience as a FIDO member, or to myself. Or if you're interested in some of the marketing programs specifically, you can direct those questions to Andrew here.
Great, so I'll kind of work us through the queue here. Here's a question. How can government organizations take part in FIDO? So Brett, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we have a government membership, and I'll say we did not have a government membership when we launched the Alliance. We did not envision government agencies actually joining the Alliance, but it was in response to demand. We had some government agencies, particularly in the U.S., who were very keen to attend the meetings, to kind of weigh in on requirements. So we created a category. We wanted to make sure that this was an industry-led effort. So one of the properties of the government membership is it's non-voting. Actually, the government agencies I've talked to, they're happy about that, because if they were to vote on something, they would have ethics lawyers, looking over their shoulder, wondering if they're trying to steer the market or something. So it's a win-win that they don't have a vote on decisions. We get to hear what they have to say. They get to be a part of the conversation. They're better prepared to either deploy FIDO or kind of know where to slot that into their various regulatory or even certification regimes. So they can just join. It's called a government membership. It's basically the same thing as a sponsor without the vote. The fees are the same regardless of what country or size. They're $15,000 a year. And one thing that we do special for governments, there's this idea of a related entity in the FIDO Alliance membership. So it's true also with corporations. Imagine a conglomerate with many different brands. One entity joins the alliance, and after that, all the related entities benefit from that one membership. So it's true with governments as well. One agency might join, but then all the other agencies of that sovereign state can also participate through that one membership. We don't differentiate between one agency and another. We just consider that country has joined the alliance. And we have several, Germany, UK, we actually have Korea, China, Australia, US, and others.
Okay, great. Here's a question. I think Alan can answer this. How do the regional working groups function? So I think Alan, maybe talk about a little bit how you've seen the FIDO Europe working group take off and grow, and how do you interact with the FIDO Europe working group companies?
Sure. So regional working groups are by definition adapted to the regional aspects. For example, the FIDO Japan working group, a lot of the activity has been, believe it or not, translation, because the FIDO standards are published in English. All the work produced by the different work groups is in English, and so there was an aspect of translation. So it may sound stupid, but it's really important actually. And then there are specifics, because in Japan the regulation is this way, in Europe it's in another way. In China it's even different, because in China there are huge companies like Alibaba and so on that have their own needs. So the work of the regional groups is adapted to the regional specifics. Now in Europe, there are two things to consider. First, there's all these regulations that are driving for adoption of strong customer authentication, which is very positive for us. Now, the problem is that FIDO is not well known in Europe. The working group started a couple of months ago. It started in November. And so the activity of the FIDO Europe working group is very much around promotion and explaining how the FIDO standards can help with all these requirements around strong customer authentication. So today, the work we're carrying out in the Europe working group is very much centered on creating communication material. We're creating a number of white papers right now, joining and participating into events to explain. So there's all this educational work that we're doing presently.
Okay. Brett, here's one for you. Are there any scenarios where associate members can take part in working group activities or contribute beyond just attending the plenary meetings?
Yes, but it's a yes, but. So the intention of the associate class of membership is, as I was describing before, attend one of the 3 annual plenary member meetings, presumably in the region you're based in. The associate membership class was developed particularly for small companies, although we do have some large companies who choose to participate at that level. So we didn't, and it's really for the company that doesn't have the resources, the time to go and be hands-on involved in development of the FIDO authentication standards or ecosystem. Now, there are some exceptions to that generality. For example, we just did something for the first time. We authorized the FIDO China Working Group to have associate members. The FIDO China Working Group will be the first, but maybe not the last, of the region-specific working groups that are looking at, growing the FIDO market in their region. So we'll see how that plays out. The organization does receive more financial support from companies that join as sponsors or board members. And so I know that the board is keen to maintain benefit differentiation so that it continues to receive the funding it needs to operate all these programs that are only expanding worldwide. So that's one example. Another, even more rare example, there have been some situations where someone, let's say, maybe they're at a university or a small company, but they've actually been critical in the invention of technology that's core to what FIDO is trying to achieve. So sometimes those companies get invited as a special expert to a working group without their employer being required to upgrade to the sponsor membership level. So that could happen in rare occasions and only by invitation from the working group leadership. So those are the other scenarios. Very recently, we recognized the need to have more professors and maybe independent researchers or graduate students kind of involved, especially on the security side of what we're doing. And therefore, we do now have a way to work on a one-off basis with professors who, again, are sought out by our leadership and invited in, almost like a fellowship, if you will. But that's another way. At the end of the day, they'll fundamentally be associates, but they'll be invited into the working groups.
Okay, great. Here's a question I'm going to answer. How does FIDO help promote vendors with FIDO solutions? So Alan touched on this, from Jamalto's perspective, that there's benefit to take part in kind of collective marketing activities that FIDO provides. Beyond that, I want to emphasize that from a marketing standpoint, we invest very much in promoting FIDO certified solutions, and FIDO is very committed to the FIDO certification program, and our marketing program reflects that. So any member with a FIDO certified solution can take part in our marketing events. So that includes trade shows we take part in throughout the year. That includes seminars where FIDO certified members can sponsor and promote their solutions. We also have a web platform for companies with FIDO certified solutions called the FIDO Certified Showcase that we, allows companies to actually get a little bit commercial in promoting their FIDO wares. So those are three of the ways that we help promote vendors with FIDO solutions. Brett, here's maybe a question to wrap up on. What industries and what sectors is FIDO aiming to grow membership?
Yeah, so to kind of recap where we are now, as you could tell from the board member companies, we have a nice balance across device manufacturers and the leading device manufacturers in the world, whether you're talking about mobile devices or personal computers, as well as device component, consumer electronic component manufacturers, chip manufacturers, secure element manufacturers. So we have a very strong representation there. We have a very strong representation from financial services, banks and payment companies. So almost all the payment networks that you might be able to get to know, all the household brands are not only in the alliance, they're on the board of the alliance. So very strong representation on financial services. We're starting to grow with healthcare. I'd like to see more healthcare expertise coming into the alliance to make sure we're really meeting all the requirements of healthcare. Aetna is an excellent start to that, and they've been very active and very vocal inside the alliance. I'd like to see more healthcare companies join the alliance, make sure we're meeting the needs of that vertical market. But there's another segment. So you might say, okay, you basically described supply and demand, but there's something in between. The integrators, the consultants, and the advisors. That is an area that there's pent-up demand for those companies. I know because a lot of relying parties, the service providers, who need to either develop or acquire this technology, they come to the Alliance quite often, asking questions, asking for briefings, asking for advice. And we are not, the FIDO Alliance are not consultants. We don't have those types of resources. We can't follow up and help someone, build their roadmap and their master plan for rolling out FIDO. And that is really a great and growing need. So companies that provide consulting services and integration services, that's who these big companies want to talk to first before they're dealing directly with vendors and writing RFPs. They often want some trusted advisor helping them through putting their plan together, analyzing their own infrastructure, and figuring out how and when to deploy FIDO. So I really hope to see that change in 2018, as I believe it will. I know that a lot of the name brands in that market space, they have been joining FIDO webinars, going to FIDO seminars. I know that they're tracking FIDO's development. And as FIDO moves into operating systems and web browsers throughout the course of 2018, I expect that we will see several of those, and I look forward to working with those integrators on how to better promote them so that all of the would-be deployers know, oh, this company has FIDO expertise, whereas maybe the integrator I normally work with doesn't yet.
Okay, great. Here's a question just came in. Does FIDO have a specific program for IoT? So maybe a little commentary on futures, Brett.
Sure. In a way of speaking, yes. So last year we formed a study group to look at the IoT market. We wanted to understand the different IoT standards. We wanted to understand the deployment schemes in IoT and whether or not the FIDO protocols, which were designed with human interaction in mind, could be repurposed for device-to-device authentication in IoT use cases. And we produced a report, and the board received that report recently, and we'll be moving forward. So the short answer to that is yes, our FIDO authentication protocols can be used in IoT, not just for the obvious use case when there's a user present, but also for device-to-device use cases and onboarding devices to your home Wi-Fi and working with smart car. One of those trade association partners I mentioned is the Connected Car Consortium. So we're working with them and bringing IoT to automotive, FIDO authentication to IoT in the automotive space, et cetera, et cetera. And if you look at who our members are, they are the leading brands in IoT. So we don't have a separate working group on IoT. And to be honest, in terms of technical work, we are focused on finishing the FIDO 2 project, which puts FIDO into operating systems and browsers. But right on the heels of that will be a big focus on IoT, optimization of both FIDO 2 protocols and the UAF protocols for IoT use cases.
Okay, another question. You touched on this a little bit, but how can academic institutions like universities join the Alliance? Do we do anything special for academic institutions?
Yes, I did touch on it, but to kind of bring it home, given that there is an academic on the call asking the question, simply send an email to info@fidoalliance.org to begin that process. But yes, we do have a way to allow academics to be full participants in FIDO Alliance. It's kind of new. There really isn't much information about it on our website, but just write to us, express an interest, and we'll follow up with you and work you through that process.
Okay. Here's another question. How does FIDO 2 change the U2F and UAF protocols, if at all? So talk about evolution of the FIDO specs with FIDO 2.
Yeah, it's a good question because I just kind of did a quick overview. So FIDO 2 doesn't change UAF or U2F. Here's sort of how to think about what's happening. UAF and U2F, they continue. They solve the problem they were designed to solve. UAF, you can build a FIDO client, or there's a FIDO client present on a device, and do multi-factor authentication in a single gesture. And it supports a lot of, I would say, maybe advanced features for relying parties who want to know a little bit more about exactly how the authentication took place, for example. So that continues, and the marketplace that is standing on the shoulders of the UAF protocols continues to grow. U2F, they solved their problem. The second factor, single purpose, special purpose security key device, in addition to a password. Now U2F actually lives on within FIDO 2. There is backward support for U2F security keys in the FIDO 2 specifications, both the WebAuthn specifications in W3C and the CTAP specifications produced in FIDO Alliance. And those work hand in hand. What FIDO 2 is kind of a focused optimization of the fundamental must-have components of FIDO authentication so that they can be implemented in browsers and operating systems. A browser and an operating system, as we have been told, which is the beauty of having an alliance with all these stakeholders, the people who know are right there, and they have explained to us, if you really want an operating system to implement this, it has to be very simple. It has to be focused and kind of well scoped. And that's the way to think about FIDO 2, an optimization of what FIDO already could do, but optimized for implementation by platforms. And with that means that some of the functionality that you might find, let's say in UAF, isn't in FIDO 2 core. The other part to be aware of with what FIDO 2 is, there are a lot of extensions for FIDO 2. So a lot of those capabilities that you'll get in UAF, those capabilities do exist in the FIDO 2 spec set, but as optional extensions that some platforms, some browsers might implement, others might not, at least at the early days of the market. So when you're a company, and again, this is why we need those third-party integrators and consultants, you're really evaluating what your needs are, you need to look at what are the capabilities that I could get for UAF. Am I basically trying to FIDO enable a mobile app, which UAF is very well suited for? Am I mostly focused on web use cases, which case I really need a browser that supports FIDO, and that would move you to FIDO 2. Understand what your requirements are, and then also understand the feature set and whether or not, for example, you need some of those extensions supported, or if you're ready to move forward with the core of FIDO 2.
Okay, super. Well, so that brings us to the end of the hour. And so, Brett, thank you very much. Alan, thank you very much. We do have some added resources if you have any further questions. So please be sure to visit these pages, membership information, information on liaisons. So as Brett mentioned, we have an active partnership program. We have an explainer video that talks about how FIDO works. There's a blog. We have a very active Twitter feed, LinkedIn, and then last but not least, we have a list of events. So in the immediate future, for those of you in Europe, we have a seminar at the European Payment Summit, March 12th. Prior to that, we'll be at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. If any of you are in healthcare, we'll be at HIMSS, speaking at HIMSS as well. And we'll have a pretty good presence at RSA conference coming up in April. So thank you all very much for joining. Again, please take a moment to fill out the survey, and the replay and slides will be made available in the next couple of days. Thank you very much.